My name is Ivy and I am 33 years old. All my life, I was always placed behind my younger sister Chelsea, the one my parents treated like a precious jewel while I was nothing but a shadow. I built myself up on my own 2 feet, working day and night until I could buy a small apartment in Brooklyn, and I considered it my greatest achievement. And yet, during an elegant family dinner at a restaurant in the heart of New York City, my parents suddenly placed a set of apartment keys in front of me and casually said, "Ivy, starting next week, Chelsea will be moving into your apartment. We've already spoken with the building manager." The room went silent, forks and knives frozen mid-air. I looked at those keys, allowed myself a calm little smile and answered plainly, "That's funny because I sold that apartment 2 months ago." My father's face went rigid, my mother froze in disbelief, and Chelsea's cheeks drained of color. In that moment, it was as if the air itself had shattered, and yet none of them realized I had prepared for this scene long ago. Have you ever been treated by your own family as if they could decide the course of your life without ever asking your opinion? If you've ever felt that sting, leave a comment so I know I'm not alone. Don't forget to like and subscribe to follow the rest of this story, because what happened after that dinner stunned them all even more. And now, let me take you back so you'll understand why I was driven to that moment. I was born and raised in a small town in Pennsylvania, in a family that outsiders thought was warm and comfortable. But the truth was very different. From a young age, I learned one painful lesson. Love and attention in my family were never divided equally. If Chelsea was the dazzling light my parents adored, then I was only the faint shadow beside her, struggling to exist in the cold, empty space that was left. Chelsea is 2 years younger than me. From the day she was born, every ounce of attention in our home turned toward her. My father often called her "Daddy's princess," and my mother proudly bragged about her every little step to the neighbors. I remember the times when my mother picked me up from school. I would hold out a paper showing a high score on a math test. She would glance at it quickly, fold it away, and immediately say, "That's fine, Ivy, but can you wait a bit? Chelsea has her dance recital today and I need to get her ready." On birthdays, the difference became impossible to ignore. When I turned 16, all I wanted was a small party with a few friends at a modest pizza place near school. I hinted for months, even left the menu on the kitchen counter. But on that day, my mother was busy taking Chelsea to ballet and my father worked late. I sat alone in my room, bought a small pizza with my saved money, and blew out the candle by myself. The reflection of that flame in the mirror reminded me, I was already used to not being remembered. By contrast, when Chelsea turned 16, my parents rented an entire hall, decorated with balloons and fresh flowers. There was a DJ, a buffet table overflowing with food, and my father even surprised her with a used car in excellent condition, wrapped with a big red bow and parked right at the front door. I stood in the corner in a simple dress I had bought at a discount store, watching Chelsea being celebrated by friends, while my parents glowed as if they had handed her the whole world. That favoritism repeated itself in every corner of our lives. When I was chosen for the debate team and made it to the state finals, my parents only sent a text wishing me luck before heading off to Chelsea's softball game. I stood on stage delivering my speech, looking out at the audience without a single familiar face, feeling the emptiness behind me. Yet when Chelsea won a small school game, the entire family came to cheer, take photos, and celebrate as though it were a national holiday. When I graduated high school as salutatorian, I stood at the podium, trembling as I gave my speech. But instead of capturing that moment for their daughter, my mother turned her camera toward Chelsea in the audience, beaming. Later, the family albums were filled with Chelsea's photos, while mine appeared only as blurry shadows in the background. The differences grew sharper in college. I knew my parents weren't wealthy, so I didn't dare ask for much. From the age of 16, I had worked part-time at a grocery store, then at a cafe, and on weekends cleaning a small library. I saved every dollar for tuition. In college, I received a partial scholarship, but it wasn't enough. So I juggled 3 jobs at once. Early mornings at a coffee shop, afternoons at the library, and evenings or weekends waiting tables. Chelsea, on the other hand, was fully supported by my parents at an expensive university in Chicago. She changed majors over and over: art, psychology, communications, dropping each halfway through. Once she even took an entire semester off to travel Europe to find inspiration. All of it was paid for by my parents. Tuition, housing, even her pocket money. Each semester of hers cost 10 times more than the help my parents said they could afford for me. $500 a term, barely enough for books. Many long nights, I collapsed over textbooks in the library after finishing my morning shift at the cafe. I asked myself what I had done wrong to not deserve love and support. The answer echoed again and again. Nothing. I had done nothing wrong. It was simply that my parents never believed I needed to be prioritized. The older I grew, the more I felt like a tenant in my own family. I sat at the dinner table, but the conversation was always about Chelsea. Her classes, her new boyfriend, her sports games. I learned to fake a smile, nod along, then clear the table once the meal ended. No one asked me how school was, if I was tired, or if I needed anyone. I once tried to speak up. I told my mother, "Do you ever notice that I need you to cheer me on too? I just won the school debate award." She only patted my shoulder and said with a faint smile, "Ivy, you're strong. You don't need us the way Chelsea does." That sentence cut like a knife. My independence, instead of being valued, had become the excuse for them to abandon me. In high school, I dreamed that one day my parents would proudly call my name at a family gathering. But year after year, that dream crumbled. I turned it into fuel to push myself harder, to prove I wasn't invisible. I studied diligently, earned praise from teachers, but those words never reached my parents' ears. One freezing winter night, after finishing a cafe shift, I sat on a crowded bus and received a picture message from my father. Chelsea had bought a new dress and he wrote, "My daughter is so beautiful and talented." I stared at the glowing screen in the dark, tears spilling down my cheeks. I wished just once that he would send a message like that to me. My childhood and youth passed in silence and endurance. I learned to tuck away my sadness, hide it deep inside, wipe my tears, and keep going. Without those years, maybe I wouldn't have been strong enough to one day sit at a lavish New York restaurant, face my parents and sister, and calmly say the words that froze the entire table. I sold that apartment 2 months ago. My college years were a grueling training ground. With a partial scholarship that covered only part of my expenses, I worked relentless schedules. Early mornings at a cafe near campus, afternoons assisting at the library, evenings and weekends at a small Italian restaurant. Some days I slept only 4 hours, my eyes burning, but I still dragged myself up for the morning shift. Friends told me, "Ivy, you're incredible." If it were me, I would have quit school. I only smiled. They didn't know quitting was never an option for me. I chose data finance, a dry but demanding field. I loved numbers and thick statistical reports that bored others. They gave me a sense of control, something I had never had in my family. I knew if I persevered, this path would lead me to stability, a way out of the favoritism I had endured too long. When I graduated, there were no flowers, no gifts from my parents. They came, but spent the ceremony talking about whether Chelsea should pursue freelance art or apply for a marketing firm. I held my diploma, my heart hollow but a fire burning quietly inside. I would prove my worth whether they saw it or not. I landed an entry-level job at a financial firm in New York as a data analyst. On my first day, I pulled my old suitcase through towering skyscrapers, overwhelmed yet exhilarated. I rented a tiny shared room with 2 strangers. No window, only enough space for a twin bed and a desk. But for me it was a start. Over the next years I poured myself into work. I was never late, never missed a report deadline, always volunteered for tasks others avoided. I taught myself coding, researched new software, and gradually drew the attention of my boss. 3 years later, I had risen from trainee to senior analyst, my salary climbing steadily. I still lived frugally, bringing lunch from home, avoiding luxury purchases, skipping vacations. Every dollar I saved had one purpose: my own apartment. I remember the day I signed the contract for my little Brooklyn apartment. It was under 900 square feet, but to me it was an entire world. I stood in that empty room, afternoon sunlight spilling through the windows onto the dark red brick wall. I pressed my palm against the cool surface, my heart trembling. At last, I had a place that was entirely mine, where no one could enter unless I allowed it. Every item in my apartment was chosen with care. I spent 6 months working overtime just to buy the gray sofa I loved. The old wooden table in the kitchen I found at a secondhand store, sanded and painted it myself. The bedroom set I pieced together from different flea markets, even hand-painted floral designs on the drawers. Nothing matched perfectly, but each piece carried the mark of my effort and love. Every time I walked into that place, I felt as if I had built a small fortress for myself. While I was struggling to build a life, Chelsea remained lost. She once worked as a receptionist at a law office, but quit in less than 3 months, saying the job was too boring. Then she switched to sales at a fashion boutique, but only lasted a few weeks because her boss was too strict. At one point, she got inspired to start a business, launching an online handmade shop. My parents paid for her supplies, hired someone to design the website, but in less than 6 months the shop shut down, goods piled up in the garage. Every time she failed, Chelsea cried and my parents comforted her. "It's okay, sweetheart, you just need to find what's right for you." While I was counting every dollar for meals, Chelsea often posted pictures of herself at the spa, traveling with friends, or showing off a new purse that mom had bought her. I wasn't jealous anymore, but there was always a sharp ache inside. I knew my parents would never admit the imbalance. To them, I was the strong one, and Chelsea was the one who needed protection. One evening at a family dinner, my father looked at me and asked, "So how have you been, Ivy?" Just as I opened my mouth, my mother cut in, "Chelsea's thinking of trying out music. She's talented, she just needs more support." The conversation instantly shifted to Chelsea, while I silently picked up a piece of vegetable from my plate, swallowing it with the familiar feeling of being erased. But I had grown used to it. I knew recognition from them would never come. I poured all my energy into my work in my apartment. I started planting small pots of greenery by the window, played soft jazz in the evenings and read books. In those moments I felt at peace. I told myself, as long as I have this place, I don't need anyone's approval. There was one time Chelsea came to visit. She walked around my apartment, opened doors, glanced around, then said, "This place is nice but a bit small for someone like you. I think it would suit me better." I gave a faint smile, pretending not to hear. But from that day on I grew cautious. I knew she hadn't simply come to visit. She looked at my apartment as if it were part of her future, and that thought sent a chill down my spine. Every time I stepped into that apartment, I reminded myself it was the only place in my life no one was allowed to touch. I had fought with sweat and tears to have it. I would never let anyone, Chelsea or even my parents, turn it into theirs. But I had no idea that peace would not last. Chelsea's uninvited footsteps, the calls and demands from my parents, all of it was inching closer, waiting to shatter the fortress I had built with my youth and determination. Chelsea began to slip into my life like an unwelcome draft. At first, it was small things that seemed harmless. One afternoon I came home from work, opened my closet and realized my leather handbag, the one I had saved 6 months of bonuses to buy, was gone. I called Chelsea immediately. She answered in a casual tone, "I just borrowed it for a bit, sis. I had an important appointment and thought you wouldn't mind." My throat tightened, my hands trembled with anger. But instead of apologizing, she laughed, "You don't need to be so uptight. A bag that beautiful should be seen by more people, right?" I hung up without a word, fury burning in my chest. It wasn't just a handbag. It was the symbol of my overtime shifts, my exhaustion, my sacrifices. Chelsea didn't understand, or pretended not to, that everything in that apartment was tied to what I had endured. Her borrowing grew more frequent. Sometimes my high heels, other times the blazer I needed for an important meeting. One night I discovered my grandmother's necklace missing from my jewelry box. When I called, Chelsea giggled, "Oh, I just wore it for a night. Don't worry, I didn't lose it." I drove straight to my parents' house in the middle of the night to get it back. But instead of supporting me, my mother looked at me as though I was the unreasonable one. "Chelsea just wanted to look nice, Ivy. You're always so hard on her." I felt like a stranger in my own family. I wanted to scream that I had lost more than possessions, that I had lost even the basic respect I deserved. But I knew in that house my words had never carried weight. The breaking point came during a short business trip. I went to New Jersey for 3 days to present a major project. When I returned and unlocked my apartment, I froze. In the living room, my sofa was covered in strange stains, blankets tossed around, empty wine bottles scattered across the table. Two strangers were asleep on the rug as if they owned the place. The kitchen reeked of spoiled food. My heart pounded as I stormed inside, only to find Chelsea sitting in the kitchen, wearing my shirt, laughing with a group of friends. "What on earth are you doing here?" I shouted, my voice shaking with rage. Chelsea blinked, feigning surprise as though I was the rude one. "Oh, you're back early. I just wanted to host a little get-together. My place is too cramped, but here it's so much nicer. My friends love it." I looked around in disbelief. My carefully kept belongings were ruined, books strewn across the floor. I rushed into my bedroom and my stomach dropped when I saw my nightstand drawer pulled open. My journal lay sprawled across the table, pages folded, some even bearing the marks of a phone camera. I shook as I picked it up, flipping through. My worst fear was true. There were entries about my loneliness, the unfairness in my family, even my struggles with mental health. Things I had never told anyone. I turned, my face burning. "You read my journal?" Chelsea gave a weak smile. "I was just curious. I even snapped a few parts to send to my friend for advice. I thought maybe they could help you feel better." "Are you insane? That's my private life." I screamed, my throat tightening. But as always, Chelsea switched tactics. She let her eyes well up, her voice trembling. "I just wanted to understand you better. I'm sorry if I upset you. But you're always so distant. You never share anything with me. I just wanted to be close to you." I was furious and exhausted. I kicked everyone out that night. But the very next morning my phone rang. It was my mother, her voice full of reproach. "Ivy, how could you treat your sister like that? She only wanted a place to spend time with her friends. You're too selfish. Why can't you share with Chelsea a little?" My hand went cold around the phone. "Mom, that's my apartment. I paid for it with my own money. Chelsea has no right to invade it." All I heard back was a sigh. "You always think only of yourself. Do you realize how sensitive Chelsea is? She cried all morning." In that moment, the bitter truth struck me. To my parents, I was always wrong and Chelsea was always right. Her invasions were never seen as faults, just naivete. And me, whenever I pushed back, I was the cruel, selfish one. That night, I sat in my ruined apartment, scrubbing stains from the sofa, putting books back on the shelves, my heart heavy. I felt as if my only safe space had been violated. I thought about those journal pages, the most honest parts of me possibly sitting on someone else's phone, gossiped about. That betrayal cut deeper than losing any possession. I remembered childhood nights when I fought for scraps of attention, only to be brushed aside. Now as an adult, I was still fighting for the right to my own boundaries. I asked myself, when would I ever be allowed to live as a normal person with respect for my limits? I sat at my desk, opened a new journal and wrote, "From this moment I have to change. If I can't protect myself, I will lose everything." The handwriting trembled, but it was a promise to myself. I didn't know what I would do next, but I knew one thing. I would never let Chelsea or anyone cross that line again. I remember clearly the evening my parents called it an important family dinner, insisting I be there. From the start, I sensed something was off. Every time they demanded I come home, it was usually about Chelsea. And this time was no different. When I walked into the old house in Pennsylvania where I grew up, the dining table was already set with Mom's beef stew, the dish she reserved for special occasions. The aroma of spices filled the kitchen, but instead of comfort, it only made me tense. My father sat at the head of the table, stern as though ready to deliver a verdict. My mother busied herself with the dishes, but her eyes kept flicking toward Chelsea, as if coaxing her before the real conversation began. Chelsea sat across from me, fiddling with her silver spoon, eyes cast down, pretending to look sad. I had grown far too familiar with that look. Behind that fragile mask always hid calculation. The meal began in silence. I carefully picked up a few vegetables, chewing slowly, waiting. At last my father set his spoon down, his voice low and grave. "Ivy, your mother and I need to tell you something." Chelsea is in trouble. I sighed inwardly but kept my composure. What kind of trouble? My mother quickly cut in, her tone so sweet it sounded fake. Her landlord was unreasonable, raising the rent without warning. Chelsea couldn't keep up, so she had to leave her apartment for now. She's really struggling. Chelsea nodded slightly, lips trembling. I tried my best, Ivy. But I just couldn't afford it. I don't know where to go. I looked straight at her, searching for honesty in her eyes, but only saw the familiar script of a play I'd watched too many times. Tilting my head, I spoke slowly. You got evicted for not paying rent for months, didn't you? My mother shot me a warning glance. Ivy, why would you say something so harsh? Your sister just needs a little help. My father continued, his tone firm as if the decision had already been made. You have that spacious apartment in Brooklyn. We think it's best if Chelsea stays there for a while. Just a few months until she finds a new place. I set my spoon down, my heart pounding but my voice steady. No. I don't agree. The air at the table grew heavy at once. Chelsea pretended to be shocked, her eyes shimmering as if on the verge of tears. My mother's brows furrowed, her voice sharp. Ivy, what did you just say? That's your sister. Leaning back in my chair, I drew in a deep breath to steady my anger. Mom, Dad, do you remember how many times Chelsea has invaded my life? She's taken my belongings without asking. She's thrown parties in my home while I was away, leaving the place in chaos. She's rifled through my journal, reading the most private things I've ever written, even snapping pictures. That isn't something small. I've tolerated far too much. Chelsea burst into tears, burying her face in her hands. I just wanted to be closer to you. I never meant to hurt you. My father slammed the table so hard the dishes rattled. Enough. Ivy, you're being selfish. All you think about is yourself. Family means sacrifice, it means sharing. My throat tightened, but I didn't back down. Sharing doesn't mean letting someone violate and destroy what I've worked for. I spent years earning that apartment. It's the only place where I feel safe. If Chelsea moves in, I'll have nothing left. My mother clutched Chelsea's hand, her eyes full of reproach aimed at me. You've changed, Ivy. You were never like this before. You've become cold, distant. I'm so disappointed. A bitter laugh escaped me. You're right, Mom. I have changed. I'm no longer the child who stays silent while everyone walks over me. I've learned how to protect myself. Chelsea lifted her tear-streaked face, her voice trembling. If you don't help me now, I truly have nowhere else to go. How can you abandon me? I looked straight at her, my voice firm. You've had endless chances. You've had Mom and Dad covering everything while I had nothing. If you still don't know how to take responsibility by now, that isn't my fault. The room fell into a suffocating silence. My father glared at me as though I had committed some grave sin. You're betraying this family, Ivy. Have you forgotten about blood ties? I swallowed hard, answering in a steady but unyielding tone. I'm not betraying anyone. I'm refusing to be used any longer. If you see my refusal as betrayal, then maybe this family has never understood me. My mother covered her mouth with her hand, tears spilling, but I knew they weren't for me. She was crying because the familiar script had been broken, because Chelsea was no longer guaranteed their unconditional protection. I pushed my chair back, its legs scraping the floor. I'm sorry, but I won't sit here listening to how defending myself is selfish. If you want to help Chelsea, let her live with you. I'm not carrying the weight of her mistakes anymore. No one spoke. I grabbed my coat, turned, and walked out, leaving behind a room thick with accusations. Driving back to Brooklyn, my eyes blurred with tears. But in the midst of the pain, I also felt a new strength. I had dared to speak the truth, to stand against the injustice that had trailed me since childhood. I knew there would be consequences, knew my parents would keep blaming me. But at least in that moment, I was no longer the silent shadow in the family. I had spoken in my own voice, and no one could take that away. That night, as I left my parents' house, my hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly they turned white. My father's cold stare, my mother's sobs, their accusations all echoed in my head. I unlocked my apartment, once the safest place I knew, and collapsed onto the sofa. Tears poured endlessly. I cried for all the years I had endured in silence, for every time I was cast aside, and for the painful truth that even as an adult, I was still treated as an outsider in my own family. I cried until my throat was raw, then picked up the phone and called Madison. She was my closest friend since college, the only one who had seen me juggle work and school just to survive. When she heard my choked voice, Madison didn't interrupt, only listened quietly. After I spilled out everything that had happened at dinner, Madison spoke softly. "Ivy, you don't have to live in the script they wrote for you. They cast you as the caretaker, the life raft for Chelsea. But you don't have to play that part anymore. You have the right to step onto a different path, one that belongs only to you." I stayed silent for a long while. Her words were like a mirror reflecting what I had always buried deep inside. For years I kept striving, hoping my parents would notice, would acknowledge me. But they never did. So why should I keep sacrificing? That night, when the tears finally eased, one thought became clear. I had to leave. Not just the apartment, but the entire grip that had bound me for so long. I would disappear from their control before they could turn the one place I still had into Chelsea's refuge. The next morning, I sat in front of my laptop, scrolling through real estate agencies. I sent an email to a small office in Brooklyn, arranging an appointment to have my apartment valued. When the agent arrived, he looked surprised at how quickly I decided. "This place could sell for a good price. Are you sure you want to move right away?" I nodded without hesitation. I want it finalized as soon as possible. After that, I went to the bank. I opened a new account at a branch far from where I lived. When the clerk asked why, I only smiled. "I want to start a private plan." Deep inside, I knew that full separation was the only way to keep my parents, or Chelsea, from interfering. I also hired an attorney, a friend of Madison's, to review all the paperwork. I wanted to be certain there was no loophole my family could exploit. After he finished reading, he looked up at me. "Everything checks out. Once you sell this apartment and transfer the deed, no one has any claim." Hearing that, I exhaled as though a heavy stone had been lifted off my chest. The following days, I lived as if I were in two parallel worlds. By day, I went to work, smiled at colleagues, attended meetings. By night, I quietly packed the essentials: financial documents, a few necessary clothes, the books closest to me, and the old wooden chair my grandmother had left behind. With every item wrapped, I felt closer to freedom. Chelsea kept calling, sending messages. Sometimes she begged, "Let me stay with you just for a little while. I promise I won't bother you." Other times she accused, "You've always looked down on me. You have no idea how hard it is for me." I didn't respond. I knew any reply would be twisted into another excuse for her to cling tighter. My parents kept pressing me. My father called, his voice sharp. "Ivy, you need to remember you're the older sister. An older sister has responsibility for her sibling." My mother was gentler, crying over the phone. "Please, sweetheart, I'm begging you. Chelsea is so fragile. Without your help, she won't survive." Hearing that made me ache and freeze inside. In their eyes, I was never allowed to be fragile, never allowed to need anyone. I began to think about a completely new future. I didn't tell anyone in the family. Only Madison knew what I was doing. One evening, we met at a cafe near my office. I shared my plan, my voice trembling but firm. Madison held my hand. "You're doing the right thing. This time you're living for yourself." Inside, I was still afraid. Afraid my parents would find out, would rage, would call me a traitor once again. But I also knew that if I didn't act now, I might never have another chance to escape. I needed a new place, a new beginning, a life free from roles forced on me. Every night, I sat in my apartment, now growing emptier, listening to the wind slip through the window, feeling as though I was saying goodbye to a part of my memories. I had once loved that place, once seen it as proof of my independence. But now it was only a battlefield where my boundaries had been trampled again and again. I had to let it go to find peace again. I laid my hand against the brick wall, closed my eyes, and took a deep breath. I whispered to myself, "I'm leaving and no one can stop me." The day I signed the contract to sell my old apartment, I felt lighter, as if I had lifted a boulder off my chest. I never looked back. The sofa, the old wooden dining table, everything I had once cherished, I left to the realtor to handle. To me, they were soaked with painful memories, with violations, with the tears I had shed in that space. I chose only a few things to take: the wooden chair from my grandmother, a handful of books worn soft from years of reading, the tea set Madison had given me when I bought my first place, and a small box holding private keepsakes. The new apartment I found was in Queens, in an old building renovated into small lofts for office workers and artists. From the very first step inside, I felt something strange, like I had finally found my true resting place. Sunlight poured through the big windows, the high ceiling revealed rustic beams, and a little balcony overlooked a green park. I could hear children playing, dogs barking in the distance, birds singing in the mornings. The place felt alive yet peaceful. I signed the lease that very day without hesitation. The landlord, an older woman named Mrs. Harriet, smiled at me. "Honey, you look like someone who really needs a fresh start. This place will be good for you." I just nodded, holding back tears. On moving day, I carried in small boxes, stacked them in the corner, then stood in the empty loft. The wooden floor creaked under my feet. The white walls carried the scent of fresh paint. No trace of Chelsea, no memories of being forced by my parents. This place was entirely mine. I drew in a deep breath, my lungs filling with new air. I began decorating in my own way. On the balcony, I placed pots of basil, mint, and a small lavender plant Madison brought over. By the big window, I set up a wooden desk with my computer and a lamp. Each morning, sunlight streamed across that corner, filling me with energy. I bought a tall bookshelf, filling it with novels I had always wanted to read but never had peace for. The apartment slowly took on my spirit. I chose soft blue bedding for my simple wooden bed. I hung small paintings I had created in quiet evenings. The space was still sparse, but in a comforting way, open enough to let me breathe, open enough for me to imagine what my life could become in the years ahead. Madison helped me mount a wall shelf. When we were done, she stepped back, looked around, and said, "Ivy, do you realize? This place is yours. Entirely yours. No one else has the key. No one can come in unless you allow it." I smiled, a smile that came from deep inside. That first night in my new apartment, I sat on the balcony, wrapped in a thin blanket, holding a cup of hot tea. Below, the streetlights cast golden shadows on the park trees. I heard young men laughing as they played basketball nearby, and somewhere faint guitar notes floated from another loft. I felt I didn't have to brace myself just to survive. I could simply sit, soaking in the ordinary beauty of life. I also began spending time for myself in ways I never had. After work, I no longer rushed home worried someone had broken in. Instead, I stopped by the local market, picked up fresh greens and some meat, and took my time cooking dinner. I tried new recipes, experimenting with dishes from the cookbooks I had collected. Some nights I invited Madison over. We ate homemade pasta, played soft jazz, talking as we enjoyed the meal. Madison squinted at me. "You look different. Lighter. Calmer." I laughed. "I feel it too. Like I'm finally breathing at my own rhythm." I knew my parents and Chelsea must have been talking. They called, left messages, but I didn't answer right away. I needed this space to rebuild myself. I knew another confrontation would come sooner or later, but I wouldn't be trembling. One weekend morning, I opened the windows, letting sunlight flood in. I sat at my desk, opened my laptop, and began writing. Not company reports, but for myself. Lines about my feelings, the pain I had endured, the relief of escaping that old apartment. I wrote until tears fell, but they were tears of release. I realized this place had become my sanctuary, a space where I could relax, heal, and begin living my true life. The little loft in Queens wasn't the fanciest, with no expensive furniture or luxury amenities. But to me, it was more precious than any mansion. Because I felt truly free. No more shadow of Chelsea, no more weight of my parents' control. Only me, with what I chose, with the life I had finally claimed as my own. 6 weeks after moving into the new loft in Queens, my life found its rhythm again. Each morning, sunlight poured through the wide windows. I brewed coffee, played soft classical music, and began my workday. It all seemed calm, yet my phone never stayed quiet. Messages and calls from my family flooded in. Some days I had 10 missed calls from my mother. Her voicemails swung between sobbing, "Ivy, where are you? I'm so worried, please call me back," and scolding, "Do you even think about this family anymore? You've abandoned Chelsea to suffer, how can we endure this?" My father spoke less, but his voice carried authority. "Ivy, this is your father. You cannot keep silent like this. Family isn't a game. You need to come back and talk face to face." Chelsea, as always, was unpredictable. Some late nights she texted, "I'm sorry sis, I was wrong, I just want to be near you." But only days later she'd send bitter lines, "You've always been jealous of me. You're selfish, you never understand what I need." Reading those texts, I didn't cry anymore. I only felt the widening distance, as if there were a wall between us that no one wanted to break except me. I began seeing a therapist, an older woman named Mrs. Reeves. Her office was small, full of light, scented with lavender oil. Sitting on a beige sofa, I felt like I could finally shed the armor I'd worn for years. I told her about being overlooked as a child, about Chelsea, about that dinner where my parents set apartment keys in front of me like it was a toy they could hand out. Mrs. Reeves listened carefully, sometimes nodding or asking me to dig deeper. When I spoke about the guilt I felt hearing my mother cry over the phone, she set her pen down and said gently, "Ivy, that guilt doesn't come from wrongdoing. It comes from a long family pattern, expecting you to carry responsibility for others. When you break that pattern, their first response will be fierce resistance. That isn't proof you're wrong. It's proof you're changing." Her words left me still. I realized I had been trapped in the same circle all along. Every time I tried to step away, my family pulled me back with tears, with blame, with the word family. And I always returned thinking I was at fault. But I didn't want to repeat it. After a few sessions, I learned to breathe slowly before reading a message from my mother, to wait before reacting when Chelsea lashed out. I wrote a reminder and taped it above my desk. Boundaries aren't selfish. Boundaries are protection. Each time my phone buzzed, I looked at that note before deciding whether to respond. One evening, my mother called non-stop until I finally answered. Her voice trembled. "Ivy, what are you doing? You've disappeared, you won't answer. Are you still my daughter?" I closed my eyes, steadying myself. "Mom, I'm still your daughter. But I need my own space. I can't keep being forced to do what I don't want." The line went silent for a moment, then came the sound of sobbing. "I don't understand, Ivy. You're breaking my heart." After that call, I cried, not out of guilt, but because for the first time I had spoken my truth. I was no longer that child eating pizza alone on her birthday, waiting for her parents to remember. I was grown now, and I had the right to decide how I would be treated. Chelsea kept trying to get through to me. One day after work, I found an envelope shoved under my door. Inside was a hastily written note. "Sis, I know you're mad at me, but I really have nowhere else. Just a tiny corner, I promise I'll behave. Please." I held the letter, my chest tight with both pity and caution. I knew too well. Chelsea's promises had never meant anything. I took the note to my next therapy session. Mrs. Reeves looked at it, then asked me, "How do you want to respond?" I thought for a long while, then said, "I don't want to respond. I want to keep my distance." She nodded. "That's your right. Not answering is an answer too." In those 6 weeks, I felt the changes inside me. I began to sleep better, no longer jolting awake at night fearing Chelsea might suddenly show up. I spent time journaling, walking in the park below my building, talking with new neighbors. I allowed myself to enjoy simple joys I had never let myself have before. But at the same time, pressure from my family grew heavier. My father texted, "Ivy, you're breaking your mother. Think of the one who gave you life." My mother even called Madison, trying to pry information. Madison told me, anger in her voice, "Your mom said you're ungrateful, that you'll regret it. Ivy, you need to stand firm. They're trying every trick to pull you back." I knew Madison was right. I knew Mrs. Reeves was right too. My silence, my boundaries, all of it left my family confused and angry. But that was the step I had to take. Otherwise, I'd fall back into the old cycle, losing myself again. One night, I sat in my new apartment, warm yellow light spilling over the page. I wrote, "I've begun my own life and my family can't accept it. But I won't go back. I'll weather every storm because only after the storm can I truly find peace. When I set down the pen, I felt steadier than ever. On a Thursday evening just after I left work, my phone buzzed nonstop. A message from my mother lit the screen. "Ivy, come home tonight. Important matter. No excuses." Below it was a short message from my father. 6 o'clock. Sharp. I stared at the words, my chest sinking. All these years, whenever my parents said, "important matter," it always meant Chelsea. I drove back to the old house in Pennsylvania, my heart heavy as stone. The house hadn't changed. The lawn trimmed neat by my father, the flower beds out front still bright with blooms my mother tended. But to me, the sight only stirred memories of being overlooked, forgotten. I inhaled deeply and rang the bell. My mother opened the door, her face trying to smile, but tension shone in her eyes. The dining table was already set, more elaborate than usual. My father sat at the head in his suit, still crisp even at home. Chelsea sat across from me, her hair curled neatly, lips curved in a knowing smile. I pulled out my chair, bracing for whatever script they had written. After a few minutes of silent eating, my father set down his knife and fork, his gaze heavy with authority. "Ivy, tonight we need to settle something practical. Your sister is in trouble, and the family has found the best solution for everyone." My mother quickly pulled a familiar set of keys from her purse, placing them directly in front of me. The metallic clink rang through the room, stabbing my chest. "We've spoken with your building manager," she said, her voice honeyed. "He was very cooperative. Chelsea will move into your apartment this weekend. Just for a few months until she gets back on her feet." I stared at the keys, the silver glint reflecting the chandelier light above. Chelsea propped her chin on her hand, smiling smugly, her eyes glittering with triumph. "I promise I'll keep it clean, sis, you don't have to worry," she said, her voice brimming with confidence as though it had already been decided. For a few seconds, the room sank into the familiar tension, their expectation that I would nod quietly, sacrifice again. But my heart didn't tremble. I lifted my head, my voice calm but clear. "I sold that apartment 2 months ago." The room went dead silent. My mother's mouth fell open, her spoon clattering against the plate. My father froze, his face flushing red, then paling. Chelsea bolted upright, her smile vanishing, eyes wide, lips trembling. What did you just say?" I held steady, not letting my emotions waver. "I don't live there anymore. I sold that apartment long ago. If you really spoke with the manager, then he's only dealing with the new owner. It has nothing to do with me." Chelsea shouted, her voice breaking. "No way. I just called the manager last week. He said everything was fine." I looked her straight in the eye, my tone firm. "You went into that place when I was gone, brought strangers there, even read my journal. That apartment was once the only safe place I had, but you destroyed it. That's why I sold it. And you will never have it." My mother's voice shook. "Ivy, what's wrong with you? How could you sell it without telling us? You kept this from your own family." I gave a faint, weary smile. "Mom, when have I ever been allowed to keep anything for myself? I've lived my whole life under neglect and comparison. I chose to protect myself. That isn't secrecy, it's my right." My father slammed his hand on the table, his voice like a hammer. "You're betraying this family. You defy your parents over pride." I met his eyes, my voice steady, almost calm. "This isn't pride. This is a boundary. You've always demanded I sacrifice for Chelsea, but never once asked what I needed. I'm an adult. I have the right to decide my own life." Chelsea sobbed, tears streaming. "You're cruel. I have nowhere to go. Are you going to let me wander the streets?" I sighed, looking at her. "You've had mom and dad covering for you again and again. Have you ever had to fend for yourself? If you're suffering now, it's the result of your own choices. No one can rescue you forever." My mother wept loudly, clutching Chelsea. "Ivy, what have you become? Where is the gentle, kind daughter I once had?" I stood, pushing my chair back. "Mom, I'm still me. But I won't let myself be trampled anymore. If love in this family means erasing myself so Chelsea can shine, then that isn't love. That's exploitation." My father's face burned red, his eyes full of rage and confusion. He had grown used to my silence, my obedience. Today my defiance left him at a loss. Chelsea slumped down, clutching the keys like a lifeline. Watching her, I felt both sorrow and release. I knew from this moment nothing would ever be the same. The air around the table was thick, the ticking of the clock loud as thunder. I adjusted my coat, lifted my head high, and walked out of that binding room. Behind me, my mother's choked voice called, "Ivy, where are you going? You can't abandon your family like this." I didn't turn back, because I finally felt free. My footsteps still echoed on the wooden floor when my father's voice struck like a hammer. "Ivy, come back. You think you have the right to speak those words in front of your parents? You're destroying this family." I stopped and turned to look straight at them. The yellow dining room light fell across my mother's face, streaked with tears. Chelsea buried her face into her shoulder, sobbing. My father sat upright, eyes blazing with fury. I drew a deep breath and spoke each word clear. "I've spent my whole life taking care of myself while Chelsea was coddled and protected. You never once treated me as a true part of this family. I was only the safety net whenever Chelsea messed up. That ends today." Chelsea lifted her head, eyes red, her voice choking. "What are you saying, Ivy? I'm your sister. I just want to be close to you. Why are you treating me like a stranger?" I looked at her, feeling both sad and exhausted. "I've opened my arms to you many times. But you never respected me. You took my things without asking, you threw parties in my apartment, you even read my private journal. That isn't closeness. That's violation. And I won't allow it anymore." My mother cried louder, clutching Chelsea. "Ivy, what you're saying is cruel. Blood is blood. How can you treat your own sister this way? You're betraying this family, betraying the parents who raised you." I swallowed hard but refused to falter. "If you call me protecting myself betrayal, then I've never truly belonged to this family. Because when I needed you most, you always turned away for Chelsea." My father slammed his hand on the table, dishes clattering. "How ungrateful can you be? We gave you everything we could, and now you stand here saying we never loved you." I looked at him, my voice unnervingly calm. "Dad, you gave Chelsea everything. To me, you gave very little and always called it enough. I had to work since I was 16 to pay for my own schooling. While Chelsea lived on your support, I scraped together every dollar. I don't resent the money. I resent that you never acknowledged my effort." Chelsea broke into sobs, clutching the keys on the table like her last shred of privilege. "I just want one chance. I have nowhere else to go. Do you really want to abandon me?" I shook my head, my voice low but steady. "I'm not abandoning you, Chelsea. You still have mom and dad, you still have people willing to help. But I can't keep being your life raft. Everyone must take responsibility for their own life, and it's time you learned that." The room grew thick with silence. I could hear my own heartbeat pounding, but I pressed on. "From now on, I have a new apartment. No one in this family will know the address. I'll keep in touch, but only when necessary and only on one condition. My boundaries are respected." My mother lifted her tearful eyes. "Do you really want to cut us off? Aren't you afraid you'll regret this?" I clenched my fists, steadying the tremor in my chest. "I'm not cutting you off. I'm setting boundaries. If you want me in this family, then you must learn to respect me, the way I've respected you all these years." My father sat silent, his face flushed then pale. He had no words left. Chelsea crumpled, sobbing as if the world had collapsed. My mother held her, crying over and over, "This family is going to fall apart." I drew in a long breath, letting my eyes roam the familiar room. The pictures on the wall were still only of Chelsea's milestones, with me barely visible in the background. The little figurines in the cabinet, the old wooden dining table, all of it soaked with the same imbalance that had never changed. I stood tall, raising my head high. If this family falls apart just because I won't sacrifice anymore, then maybe it was never strong to begin with. Then I turned and walked away. The scrape of my chair on the floor, my mother's sobs, my father's voice calling after me, all blended into chaos behind me. But with every step I felt lighter than ever. I knew this wasn't the end, but the beginning of an even fiercer battle. But I was ready. When the door of that old house shut behind me, I drove back to Queens in absolute silence. My heart was still racing, echoes of blame and tears circling in my head. Yet when I opened the door to my new apartment and the soft light from the window poured in, a different feeling washed over me. I dropped my bag on the floor, leaned against the wall and closed my eyes. A strange relief filled me, as if I had finally broken free from chains that bound me for years. In the days that followed, I focused on living for myself. I joined a book club near my neighborhood. Every Wednesday evening we met in a small cafe discussing novels, sometimes history or memoirs. For the first time I was listened to and heard without being interrupted by talk about Chelsea. On weekends I joined a hiking group. The crunch of our footsteps on the trail, the smell of wild grass and damp earth, the laughter of new friends, it all made me feel reborn. I even signed up for a painting class at night. Holding a brush, letting colors flow freely across paper, I realized I could express feelings I had never dared put into words. My new apartment became a place of healing. I planted more greenery, hung my paintings on the walls, rearranged the bookshelf. Every corner reflected only my choices, untouched by anyone else. I learned to cook elaborate meals just for myself, to enjoy the silence I had once feared. My family went quiet for a long time. No more frantic calls, no nightly accusations. At first I felt a pang, as if they had truly cut me off. But then I realized it was a chance to stand firmly on my own, to test the strength I had reclaimed. One April morning I received a message from my mother. "Ivy, can you meet us at the cafe near the station? We need to talk." I stared at the words for a long time, then agreed. When I walked in, I saw my parents sitting in the corner, their faces tense. My father no longer carried his usual sternness. He looked tired, his gray hair more pronounced. My mother glanced up, her eyes uneasy. I sat down, waiting. My father began, his voice hoarse. "Ivy, I've been thinking. Maybe we weren't fair. We gave too much to Chelsea and forgot that you needed care too." I froze. That admission, brief as it was something I never thought I'd hear. My mother reached for my hand, tears slipping down her cheek. "I'm sorry for making you feel like you didn't belong. I never meant to, but I was wrong." I breathed deeply, emotions surging, sorrow, relief, and caution all at once. I gave a small smile and answered, "Thank you for saying that. But I need to be clear. I can't return to my old role. I'll stay in touch, but only in a relationship where my boundaries are respected." They sat in silence, then nodded. It wasn't a complete change, but it was a beginning. A few weeks later, I received a message from Chelsea. It wasn't accusations or begging like before, just a short note. "I've started therapy. The doctor told me I should apologize to you. I'm not ready to say everything yet, but I want you to know I'm truly sorry." I sat staring at the screen for a long time. My heart tightened, but it wasn't the old pain anymore. I simply replied, "I appreciate your apology. When you're ready, I'll listen." As time passed, I kept building a new life. I made new friends. Some were designers, some teachers, even a few middle-aged mothers from my painting class. We shared everyday stories. No one knew about Chelsea, no one compared me to anyone else. I felt like myself, whole and at peace. One afternoon, sitting on my balcony overlooking the green park below, I thought about the path I had taken. From being a 16-year-old girl working to pay for her own schooling, to a 33-year-old woman brave enough to let go of an apartment that once meant everything, only to find herself again in a new space. I realized that everything I had done wasn't to fight against my family. It was to learn how to love them the right way by not letting them hurt me anymore. I whispered to myself, sometimes to love family the right way you have to be brave enough to set boundaries. No one has the right to turn your sacrifice into obligation. Respecting yourself is the foundation for any relationship to be healthy. And as the sunset fell, I smiled, knowing I had truly been reborn. That was my journey, from a daughter overlooked in her own home to a woman strong enough to stand up, protect her boundaries, and reclaim her life. I won't say it was easy. Every tear, every reproach, every long night is etched in my memory. But I learned that love does not mean letting others walk over you, and that family is only truly strong when every member is respected. What about you? Have you ever had to set boundaries with the very people you love most? Do you believe that sometimes we must be strong enough to say no in order to preserve love in a healthy way? I truly want to hear your story because maybe your experience will give someone else the courage they need. If you feel connected to this journey, leave your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to follow the channel to hear more stories about family relationships and how we learn to stand tall in life. The stories may differ, but they all share the same message. We can only truly love others when we've learned to respect ourselves.